Good afternoon, ladies and gents. It's Justin Johnson on my academic integrity of arts and humanities. On the module DD211 on an influence youth today, young teenagers, mature teenagers, young adults, mature adults, OAPs. You want to better your life chances, life goals, life aspirations. Get yourself to adult learning, maybe college, university. Broaden your horizon. On the module DD211, when you read, make sure you record it, Castbox, Spotify, YouTube. You can always listen back over your notes. When you're laying in bed, you can listen back to the reading. Anyway, the book was published at Open University, Walton Hall, Milton Keynes. First published 2015, second edition 2022. On page 86, chapter 15, Elections and Parties in the UK and the US. Page 86. Political parties and electoral choices. A party system is the system of interaction resulting from an inter-party competition. Satori, 1996, page 44. The interaction reflects the political system, but particularly the key societal differences which previously served to politically divide the community. Parties therefore reflect historically important cleavages in society. In European societies, such as cleavages expressed in party differences, take different forms in different countries. Centre versus periphery, state versus church, land versus industry, owner versus worker. History then is a writ large in the contemporary forms of the parties take. In the UK, it was a fourth cleavage, that the owner versus worker, that found expression in the emergence of Conservative and Labour as reflected this distinction. Labour being for the worker, the Conservatives for the owners. Even if both parties drew support from other social groups, the Conservative always enjoyed significant support among Conservative, small c, working class electors in the US. Modern Republican and the Democratic parties can clearly trace their antecedents back to the formation of the Republic in 1776, but mainly reflect the US politics as it played out since the American Civil War, 1861 to 1865. The above cleavage has been present in US society and finding some expression in the party system. It has meant that Republicans have historically stood to the right of the Democrats, but US parties reflecting US exceptionalism remain distinctive from European parties. The Democrats may have been far more sympathetic to federal government intervention in their economy. The Republicans, but have historically been far less sympathetic to such intervention compared to European Union parties of the centre-left, such as the UK's Labour Party, on social issues, which remains the key fault line in contemporary US politics. The majority of Democrats have become far more liberal than nearly all Republicans. Page 87. The US Democratic Party symbol is a donkey. The Republican Party used an elephant. According to the 𝖀𝖓𝖊𝖆𝖊𝖆 model, the US is an example of a classic two-party system, a majority system, but the UK now has a much changed three-party plus other party systems, a consensus system. In regard to the party systems, both the UK and the US deviate from 𝖀𝖓𝖊𝖆𝖊𝖆 model in the UK from 1945. Setting aside the particularities of Northern Ireland, the party system has taken the following forms. 1945 to 70 period, the classic era of the two-party majoritarianism, characterised by the fact that Labour and Conservatives won an average of 90.3% of the vote between them. 1970-97 period, perhaps best described as emergence of the two-party plus other systems, as the dominance of Labour and the Conservatives was challenged by the emergence of the third party. The Liberal Democrats and their predecessor parties, the Liberals and the short-lived SDP, and also by the growth of nationalist parties in Scotland and Wales. Post-1997 period, the final demise of the two-party system and its subsequent fragmentation into a three-party plus other system, and the emergence of this distinct party system In elections to the Scottish Parliament and the Welsh Assembly, British electors are more volatile than ever, and far less tied to parties than they were previously. Consider the SNP, electoral destruction of Labour in previously Labour-dominated Scotland after 2015. By contrast, the US, if essentially a consensus democracy, according to the most of 𝖀𝖓𝖆𝖊𝖆𝖐 criteria, has a very majority two-party system. Since 1861, either the Republican or the Democratic Party has provided the president and the congressional majority in both and the House and the Senate. Seriously third-party candidates for president emerged in 1912 to 1948, 1968 and 1902, but on three of those occasions, 1912, 1948 and 1968, that the third party represented a breakaway from one of the two established parties. In contemporary congressional elections, some 98% of votes casted are from Republican Democratic candidates. In the past 40 years, but with three unusual exceptions, both parties are provided every member of Congress. This two-party system may have previously hidden a four-party system of sorts. Of liberal Republicans, conservative Republicans, liberal Democrats, and conservative Democrats, but US certainty retains the most pure two-party system in the world. Perhaps even more so presently, with left-right polarisation forcing the Democrats 𝕻𝖊𝖆𝖊𝖆𝖏 and the Republicans rightward. Conservatives small c, Democrats and liberal small l. Republicans are becoming a rarity. Political culture, historical experience and electoral politics, especially as determined by electoral system, structure, the prevalent party system UK and US. These provide electoral environment within which enfranchised citizens choose to cast their vote. Such is the political culture of the US that electors often define themselves according to their ideology. Conservatives tend to vote Republican and liberals tend to vote Democrat. Voters are often willing, however, to cast their vote for an individual conservative or liberal candidate first and for parties second. By contrast, UK voters tend to vote for parties first and individuals second. This important distinction has helped to reinforce unity of cohesiveness of UK parties compared to US ones. That important distinction, notwithstanding, political scientists have proposed three models to explain electoral behaviour in the UK and the US over time. The sociology model examines the relationship between social characteristics and vote. It is also known as a social voting model, in which social class reflecting one's employment explains voting behaviour. Working class UK electors were said to be more likely to vote Labour and middle class electors. Conservative urban US blue-collar workers were more likely to vote Democratic. The social physiology model examines the relationship between voters, partition self-images and vote, and is also known as a party identification model. Party identification suggests that electors enduringly identifying with one party rather than another, and by being socialised as electors, form an enduring identity as being a Conservative or a Labour voter, a Republican or a Democrat. The issue voting model examines the relationship between voters' preferences and the vote. It is also known as the present day. The balance voting model, which suggests electors make their choice based upon their perception of issues, party appeal and, increasingly, their estimation of party leaders. In the past 50 years or so, three models have been advanced to help explain electoral behaviour. Each model retains some validity, but empirical evidence suggests that the first two models now clearly lack the purpose of the third. Social class is no longer the predictor of the party support that it once was. Some working class voters may still habitually vote Labour in the UK and Democratic in the US, but by no means the rule. Many traditional Labour voters in the red wall seats abandoned the party being voted for the Conservative alternatives, such as UKIP, the Brexit Party, and switched to the Conservatives in 2019. Today, far fewer contemporary electors can now be classified as strong party identifiers, firmly committed to supporting one party over another at each and every election. The existence of many strong, stable participant voters, not weak, occasional ones, lay at the heart of party identification model. Over time, then, the number of floating voters, those unattached to a specific party by either social class or partnership, has substantially increased. There are still voters who vote following what they consider to be their class interest, and many others still who support that party they strongly identify with, but electoral behaviour in both the UK and the US has become increasingly changeable. As a result, both the class and the party identification voting models, in spite of their having some continuing merit, no longer provide an all-encompassing explantation of UK and US citizens that vote. Page 90, chapter 15 still. Instead of electors and parties being linked by continuing ties and attachment, contemporary voters increasingly make electoral decisions based upon how they, their families and neighbourhoods have been and could be affected by major contemporary conditions and their assessment of how successful or not the government has been in either creating or tackling those conditions. This notion is issue voting argues that voters are more likely to vote for a party or government when it has been economically successful and has delivered prosperity and to them as individuals. By rewarding the government by re-electing it, electors believe that the government, rather than the opposition, would be better able to secure economic success for them and for the country in the future. Elections are thus determined by what are called valence politics, in which voters share a common preference on certain issues. This suggests that voters agree about what the government should be elected to do. They believe it should manage the economy, secure economic growth, achieve and maintain low rates of inflation and unemployment, ensure national and local security and the rule of law, and provide a wide range of well-funded, efficient and effective public services. Voters, because they focus on such valence issues, vote for the political party, but also increasingly the party leader, prime minister or president they consider can do the job of the government best and deliver what electors want. From this perspective, voters support one party rather than another because of the evaluation they make of the party's ability, or that of its leader, to deliver on the politics they value. They can also punish those parties, usually the party in government, that have not delivered on these policies. Voter identification can be either positive or negative. It can obviously change over time in response to political, economic and social trends. Valence politics encourage voters to evaluate the government's party's actual record and opposition party's potential. It radically reconceptualizes party identification. Seeing it as not long-term physiological attachment to a party, but as a running tally of the government's performance. Patty and Johnson, page 2009, page 468. Governments, as a result, lose election when voters feel that the delivery has not been satisfactory and when the opposition is considered to offer a credible alternative. This is when potential say wins over performance because the government's performance is considered by enough voters to be woeful. Electors and parties' votes increasingly pay attention to party leaders. Leadership is a valid issue that few of us would want to elect a prime minister with no leadership skills. Perceptions of leadership competence have independent effects on party choice, even after controlling four factors, such as underlying party identification and evaluation of the economy. UK leaders matter and could be an electoral asset for the party, as 𝕻𝖊𝖆𝖊𝖆 in 1907 or a liability as 𝕻𝖆𝖽𝑔𝖑𝖎𝑙𝑎𝑏 become in early 2008. Other valence issues of importance in influence party choice include voters' evaluation of competence in handling the major public services such as NHS and education. Benefits such as pensions and public problems such as crime and security. This model argues that UK electors make judgment before casting their vote, and that such judgments, even if they are made for personal, egocentric reasons, help explain the electoral choice that voters make. Our analysts indicate the electoral politics over the past 40 years. It can be understood as using individual rationally framework, three major predictors of electoral choice: leadership images, partisanship, and evaluation of economic performance. as key as the balance. I just want to highlight last 2 pages, and I'm going to call that it for this afternoon. Model analysis of a turnout demonstrate the explanatory power of cost-benefit calculations. That's an argument by assessment of the overall benefits to the political system in general, which are element in general incentives model beyond electoral participation. Satisfaction with the democratic process itself depends primarily on assessments of institutional and policy performance, that is, on balanced judgments. The balanced politic model thus posits a significant shift from identity to evaluation as a core consideration of how electors make choices and cast their votes. As a result, election campaigns, which on both the US and UK now essentially range across entirely of presidential, congressional or parliamentary term preceding the election, matter more than ever. Parties have to, and they clearly perceive that they have to, compete with one another for votes and office by convincing an ever more sceptical electorate that they have more attractive set of leading politicians and policies than their opponents. And new attachments such as Leave and Remain identities forged from the 2016 UK referendum on European Union membership, reinforced in the Brexit wars that followed until the UK eventual exit, now lay claim to electoral alliances. Page 93, Parties and Personalisation. Presidentialisation in the UK, US personalised from the election, meaning that the voters have been always to evaluate the personality of candidates. After all, at a presidential election, they are asked to choose between the claims made by 2 or more competing individuals in the UK. Past arguments that leaders matter, like electorally, have been successfully changed by findings suggesting they have become key political actors driving vote choice. Clark et al. 2004-2009, 𝕻𝖃 and Webb 2007. There remains much debate about what the extent of which UK parliamentary party leaders have become electoral influencers in their own right in what were once party-based general elections. 𝕻𝖃 2009, page 415. But the fact they are matter more previously is not in doubt. Attention has highly switched for establishing that leaders matter to analysing the degree to which they do matter. 𝕻𝖃 2009. Of course, even if many electors make their electoral choice on issues other than their evaluation of party leader, the fact that parties and the professional pundits who help organise opinion increasingly consider that leaders affect the choice of electors has significantly reinforced the leader-centric way in which contemporary party politics is enacted. In both the US and the UK, party image and appeal, not least of the party leader, now forms the heart of the party's electioneering strategy. Parties have to, or preserve they have to, compete with one another for votes and office by convincing an even more sceptical electorate that they have a more attractive set of the leading politicians and policies than their opponents. Denver and Garnett 2014, Clark et al. 2004-2009. The 2 major parties have been adversely affected by these facts, but party leaders can be positively advanced by becoming the principal means by which their party electioneers changes in campaign strategy, thus reflect the essentiality of party leaders. But the essentiality of the party leader prompts further changes in campaign strategy. This is the case not only for the campaign period following the dissolution of Parliament, but for the entire Parliament. UK campaigns being pitched toward the needs of televisual media, now project policy through party personalities, none more or so than the party leader. I'm going to leave it there. Or shall I finish it? Then the party elections have been subject to the impact of television since 1959, so there is nothing intrinsically remotely new this, but as evidenced by the televised party leader debates in the UK at the UK 2010-2015 elections. Personality and the character of party leaders is becoming more and more central to the national media-centred postmodern campaign. Leaders now dominate electoral appeals their parties make. Are UK parties then becoming more like US parties? Clearly, party forms reflecting the respective political systems of the UK and the US remain very distinctive. But it is certainly the case of UK parties believing that political leadership is the key medium of political discourse and information. Foley 2000, page 230. Now more than ever build themselves around their parties. Prime Ministers cast a larger shadow over modern politics than ever before. In modern politics in the UK, party leader, especially when Prime Minister has become, in Michael Fo's 2000, eliminating phrase, stretched away from other party figures. This usually empowers a party leader, but can also disempower him or her. Being praised in good times means one can be blamed in bad times. From some political scientists, such as political personalisation, reinforced by social media focus on party leaders, encourages some form of UK presidentialisation, the premiership of Tony Blair. He saw it suggested that Blair had become powerful. He had become a president. Some argued that the UK Prime Minister has outgrown the parliamentary system. Presidentialisation enabled some scholars to theorise the party leader. When Prime Minister has become more powerful over time, Foley 2000, Pogan and Webb 2007, the case of presidentialisation, however, is overblown, even if it eliminates many aspects of UK politics. Blair, for instance, while powerful, was never as powerful as was often suggested. Having to work with and through his Chancellor, Gordon Brown, Blair never commanded his executive in a manner in which even the weakest US president can routinely do. Presidentialisation, which had argued that the Prime Minister is always powerful, fell from favour after Blair's resignation. When Brown proved a weak and less effective Prime Minister, few, if anyone, suggested Brown had become president. Fewer still, given the realities of coalition government, referred to David Cameron in such fashion when he had to share some degree of power. Over both the choice of policy and the ministerial personnel, with the Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg, so weak was Theresa May at the end of the premiership. She would have been described as a resident of Downing Street, not a president. In fact, much as a dog cannot become a cat, a Prime Minister cannot become a president. UK Prime Minister, largely thanks to the cohesiveness and unity of their party, can be means of their partisan Commons majority, be often far more powerful than a president. Contemporary politics cannot make the UK Prime Minister in terms president, because being a parliamentary chief executive and authoritative prime minister is more influential. 𝖀𝖓𝖊𝖆𝖊𝖆 2005. Last page. Conclusion. Political parties are the key element in securing parliamentary democracy, but they are not only element. Institutional rules on holding elections and on voting greatly influence political outcomes. In the UK, electoral politics strongly contributes to creating a more powerful party dominance, but in the US, electoral politics is weakened by the institutional separation of power within the federal government and between the federal government and the 50 states. Subject to limitations on the government action imposed by the fixed constitution, the US retains a two-party system, but the traditional two-party system in the UK has considerably fragmented during the last 40 years, with three-party politics the norm, and four parties plus other politics in Scotland and Wales, and with other parties such as UKIP having emerged, in spite of the continuing fact that the only two largest parties are likely to ever be able to form a single-party government following Westminster's elections. The UK party system has clearly undergone a series of significant changes during the last 30 or so years. The UK's record of returning Labour or Conservative single-party governments in each election since 1945 ended in 2010 when the electoral system for the first time failed to ensure that one party held all executive power. The conservative Liberal Democratic coalition was formed by virtue of its being able to command a two-party Commons majority. Generally speaking, this example of coalition politics at Westminster notwithstanding, the party face of the UK executive and legislature means that the executive, even when formed by a two-party coalition, faces fewer checks and balances that would be the case of a coalition was formed of three or more parties, as frequently happens in other UK countries. It also faces far fewer checks and balances than those fed by the US presidential executive. This remains another structural feature of UK majority politics, part of the club ethos of Westminster politics. It previously granted power to a strong, authoritative single-party government, but then empowered a strong, authoritative two-party coalition government at the 2015 and 2017 election. A single-party government was once more returned. Even when May misled the majority, she inherited as was a single-party government with a substantial majority in 2019. In terms of election parties, the UK model of parties and elections concentrates power in the hands of plural majority. Empowering fewer political actors and fewer political institutions, the UK has long prioritised strong government over effective representation. Its electoral system, unless it changes, continues to advance fewer parties, then more of it continues to facilitate three parties plus others. Politics returning strong single-party governments 2015-2019. Even if between 2010 and 2015 it usually produced a coalition, US model does the opposite, sharing and dispersing power among a greater number of actors and institutions elected in a variety of federal, state and local elections. There we are. Got to page 105, we call that there.